I feel like this is one of those things that comes out much easier than goes in. But we'll cross that bridge when we get there. Alright guys, so I'm going to do something a little bit different this time around. Instead of playing music during the time lapse, I'm going to go ahead and talk. One of the clips that I ended up recording for you guys here, I went ahead and explained what I was doing. Unfortunately, I never took it off a time lapse, so you just see me pointing to a bunch of stuff, but can't really hear anything, so I'm just going to go ahead and talk through this. So right now what I'm doing is I went ahead and I jacked up the subframe just to apply pressure from the bottom, and I'm undoing the last 4 nuts that are holding the rear subframe together. You want to make sure you do this that way as you undo the nuts on the subframe, you know, the weight of the transmission and diff don't potentially damage the threads on the studs. So always apply pressure there, and it's always good just so it all drops down evenly. As you can see here, I'm kind of going around making sure that everything's clearing and making sure that nothing is snagged or stuck. The other part too is eventually you're going to want to get some jack stands. You may or may not need to get under there and undo some clips, and if you're putting your hands, feet, body underneath that subframe, you know, the jack is there, but always stress the jack stands. You don't want to get hurt trying to do something on your car that may take 2 seconds to prevent. So here's the clip that I was talking about where I forgot to take it off a time lapse. I went ahead and slowed down the time lapse a little bit. Here I'm showing you that I dropped the subframe just enough below the studs. Here's the conduit that runs right behind the diff. It's clipped into those plastic clips that I'm pointing to. And it basically goes through right where the axle goes, and then one of the conduits or one of the wires is hooked up to that back caliper, and the other one, or I'm sorry, not the caliper, I believe that's the speed sensor, and then the other one also goes to the other side. So those do have to get unhooked. The other part are these brake lines here that I'm pointing to. They actually have to, they stay in the car. So they have to clear past those axles that I just showed. So the axles actually have to get removed from the transmission or popped out of the transmission, not necessarily removed. So what I'm showing there is I'm basically going to take a crowbar, wedge it between the axle and the transmission, and just gently pry. They do come out. It just takes a little bit of time, so don't force it, don't damage anything, just slowly pry away, and you'll get it. Moving on to the fun part, which is removing the axles. So here I'm just ensuring everything will clear. Taking a crowbar, wedging it between the axle and the transmission. Once it pops out of the transmission, you can basically just come out to the wheel well and pull the axle right out. Once you position your conduit, kind of have it drooping over the back of the differential, make sure everything's clearing. As you drop the subframe, you're going to basically have to drop it inch by inch and slide the brake lines in the space right between the axles and the transmission. They kind of want to stay in the position that they've been bent in, which sometimes, or not sometimes, but it does impede them just simply sliding out. Here's where I start to push the whole assembly out. The only notable thing here is once you get to the point where you have a little bit of space, you're going to want to undo the 2 bolts that hold the slave cylinder on there. That way it can slide off and the entire assembly can come out without any issues or any snags. All right, so it looks like the wiring conduit is disconnected and should not pose an issue when I go to pull this thing out. So let's take a closer look. At this. It feels like it's stuck on something. But it is not. The shifter is not clearing. So, long story short, to make your job easier, you should probably take the shifter out. Alright, so I got the shifter out. 4 bolts. Took 30 seconds. I'm going to go ahead and start pulling this back. Supporting the torque tube with the jack stand. I don't know if you can see it underneath the car. And then as I move it, I'll just go back and forth, lower it down, and then drag this thing out and lay it out over here so we can see it. One thing to note is there are a lot of wires and brake lines, so you may want to watch that as you're lowering it, moving it around, so you don't tear anything up. The conduit, the plastic on it is very, very brittle. All that stuff I'm assuming is brittle considering the age of the car. So fairly easy to snap. So just take your time. All right, let's see what we can do. Loose. Jesus. That does not want to come off. All right. I don't particularly recommend doing this, considering it's just a jack stand that's holding this thing up. But it'll be all right. So the conduit is for the most part free, with the exception of this guy here. Well, that sucks. I'm not exactly sure what that was, but it exploded in a million pieces. All right. Funny place to be in. I'm way too fat for this. All right. Oh gosh. All right. Come this way. Right. I feel like this is one of those things that comes out much easier than goes in. But we'll cross that bridge when we get there. All right, so rear subframe is removed. Just want to show you guys a few things that I was unhooking when I was underneath the car, just so you're aware. So the conduit goes in through here and kind of rides the top of the transmission, the diff, transmission, and the torque tube. You have a few sensors that are plugged in. These are very, very, very easy to see. So as long as you take your time, lower it a couple inches at a time and look, you won't miss this. But you have this guy here, you have this guy here, you have this guy here. The plugs for these two were super brittle, and I will show you where one basically came apart on me. See the piece here?
So I don't know. I don't think I was prying on it too hard. It was stuck in there. The good news is it doesn't look like anything's damaged on it. Wires are intact. So I tried plugging it back in. It plugs back in. I'm just gonna go ahead and plug it back in, zip tie it together to make sure it stays there, and call it a day. This is what the bottom of the car looks like. So as you can see, here are the brake lines that had to clear the axles. They go up and they're held on by this guy, and then they ride the inside of the tunnel. You have your conduit that I talked about. You have your plastic pieces that hold the conduit together. I'll probably end up, I don't know, somehow fixing this, maybe putting a bunch of tape over it. I don't know, we'll see. But what you want to make sure you're doing is watching this guy. It gets flat right here, and this part here sits on the side of a torque tube, and I'll show you what that looks like here. So that flat piece was put in here, here, and here, and you can't really see it up until you start lowering the actual rear subframe. I actually heard it, so that's why I knew something sounded off. I ended up feeling up top, felt this bracket, and then pushed up, felt it pop out. So when this goes back in, obviously that conduit's gonna have to sit into that. So looks like when these are bent. Put shaft. All right. So there it is. A closer look at the axles. They basically snap in. To take them out, you just take a pry bar, you pry between here and here very gently, and they should pop out, and then just pull it out straight. Just keep in mind when you have it jacked up in the air and this part is sagging, this will be in straight, but it'll be at an angle. So when you pull it out, make sure you pull this part out straight and not at an angle with the axle, otherwise it'll never come up. It helps if you grab the bottom of this, kind of lift it up and down as you pull the axle out. Other than that, that's basically it. So next step is going to be to go underneath the car, start taking the clutch out, and I'll go ahead and take a video of that as well. See you guys shortly.